Hello, it's Max again with some CU Build coaching. So the big question is what are some JavaScript libraries that I use to get things fast? In this case, I think almost every application that I think people want to build has some type of list view. So if you want a list view like this, super fast, stay tuned. This is datatables.js. It is a fantastic library. I use it in production as well as quick, rapid application development, like hackathon type scenarios, because it can give you views like this literally within moments and allows you to focus on the data and the actual business value rather than having to build mundane boilerplate code just to show list views. As you can see here, we have functionality such as entries per page. We have pagination. We have the ability to search. We have the ability to order. We have just some nice language, telling how many records there are. So if you want something like this in your application, keep watching. So, this again was a previous submission that we had, and this was just like literally live working software that we were able to accomplish within like an hour. But what are the puzzle pieces you are going to need? All right. So, the first thing that I'm going to assume is that you have an ASP.NET application, but actually that's not the requirement. The real requirement is I'm going to assume that you have jQuery and probably Bootstrap 5, which are defaults within the ASP.NET MVC core project. If you have those puzzle pieces, really all you need to do then is go out to datatables.net. You're going to click download, and you are going to allows you to build like your own custom minified download package. Now, I just said Bootstrap 5 and jQuery. You're going to stick with data tables as the default styling, data tables as a selected package, and you don't need any of the other extensions. And you're just going to go ahead and download these files, come in a zip file. It'll give you the minified data tables, CSS, and the JS. That's it. You add them to your project. I'll quickly show you if you don't know how. You quickly add them to your project. Obviously, you link the style sheet and you embed the script using those lines of code. That's it. You're ready to use data tables. Okay, so what does that look like? In our scenario, we have a list view that then goes to a details view when clicked. Okay, so what do we need to do? Let's go to the index view. The index view is the list view. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a table entry. We're going to give it an ID. That's important because we need something to snag on as a jQuery selector. And then we're going to define what columns we want. Really, these columns are just for display purposes because as you can see, like we didn't do anything else. Data tables is going, to be the one that actually modifies the DOM and adds all the rows and records and all that other cool stuff that you just saw into the page. Just some quick notes. Stripe, hover, and row border are specific. There's tons of others, but those are just specific data table classes that you can adorn to a data table so that you can get striped. Every other row is striped. What was the other one? Row border is so that you get these little lines in between, and then hover is the hover effect. Um, just some little styling that gives it a little extra pizzazz. Okay, so how do we then get our data into the data table? That's the big question. So within a script tag, in this case, we're using jQuery again. So within a document ready, we are going to define a JavaScript object. In this case, the object or the variable is called table. Not very impressive, but there you go. We're going to say new data table. We're going to bind it to a jQuery selector. In this case, the ID example, which was the table ID. Okay, these are the puzzle pieces you need to know. Number one, data tables is a super feature rich thing. You can do things client side. You can do deferred rendering. You can do all these things. My favorite pattern, because it just kind of stands up to every single scenario really, really well, is using Ajax on to push and pull the data, and then do everything on the server side. So allow the server to do server side stuff really, really well. Allow the client side to work with a lighter set of data and do what it does well. So in this case, we're going to say we're going to use Ajax. Here's the endpoint that we want to push and pull data from using index JSON. So the members controller and index JSON, and we'll go there in a minute. And we're going to want to post. We're going to do all that processing server side, whether it's reordering, searching, whatever. Our default ordering is going to be the very first column, zero-based index, ascending. If we have 0 records, this is the message I want to display. If I'm searching, okay, reverse that. I think if there are no rows, I think this is the error message. I think if you're searching and there are 0 records, this is the message. So you can kind of slightly customize them. Mark, we're going to skip that for a moment. We're going to double back. But here's page length, how many by default, records you want per page. But this is the real meat and potatoes right here, which is index.json or index.json is going to be giving you a payload, a collection of JSON objects. And this is where you define then what your columns are. So the first column I want is data, or is with then data is the expression for data tables, and it's going to bind to the JSON property ID. Just so you can peek, here is the ID. We're going to have name be bound, another property called stress grade and stressed. We're going to define the width. We can do that here. There's another property called visible, even if you want a particular column invisible, maybe because you want it part or available to work with or to look at when you are doing other stuff. I can demonstrate that in a second. You can also have custom renderers. So you say render string name, and you see that when it goes to render that particular property, it will call this function instead. And just like I said, what'll happen if you want to render something contextually based on another property that's not shown on the data table, but that's coming back from the back end. That's where you can say, if this is this, make this other decision when rendering this thing. That gives you a lot of power, such that you can bring back from the back end actually more data than you're displaying for front end display purposes. Class name, that's another way to add classes to the rows. In this case, data table or DT dash center is a way to center the thing. And then here are 2 really important ones: searchable and orderable. And then visible is probably the third most important one aside from the basic data, which is allow this column to be searchable. If you have a hidden column that's a GUID, for example, like you might not want that searchable. So, you type the letter or, the letter D, and for some reason, a bunch of rows are showing that don't make sense to be showing because on the UI, they're not there. So the letter D doesn't exist. Orderable also is another one that sometimes doesn't make sense that you want to order by that thing. And it just allows you some expressiveness to search or not search or order or not order within the UI. So for example, on these ones, searchable and orderable false for the stressed. So for example, I go here, let's pop open 100 and let's order by, let's order by this. So we see these urgents. I can't type the word urgent and expect to see that particular row. Also, in this case, it doesn't make sense that I can order by the urgents. Business value, maybe it does make sense, but for this demonstration, I decided not to. Okay, so that's it when it comes to wiring stuff. I mean, like I said, you can set up custom renderers. In this case, I'm doing Bootstrap 5 badges. for a particular some of my columns. But really, that is the nuts and bolts. Maybe let me talk about this before we jump to the .NET backend. And then on this scenario, I'm saying, okay, for my data table variable, whenever I click a row, I want to get the data out of that row. That's perhaps maybe why you want to be bringing back more data than you're actually showing. And then I want to jump the window location to the specific details of that particular member or that particular record. So that's really how you go from list views to detailed views really, really quickly and be able to build these things out. So let's go to the members controller and I'll show you the .NET. So when we render the index, we're just showing that index view that you just saw, really nothing special. The index JSON is then where the magic happens. So it's taking in something called data table parameters. If you were to look at what data tables is going to end up posting to this method, it's a bunch of data table contractual type goo. What we did then, or what you can do too, is create a class like this called data parameters. And then using the JSON property names, get it such that then that post of JSON deserializes into this nice object for you to be posted as a parameter such that you can understand what is kind of happening in the UI on the top side of things. So data tables is going to say, hey, I may or may not have a search parameter. Like I was typing the name Alex. What column am I currently ordering? What direction am I ordering that column on? What columns do I have? And is it orderable or searchable? What's its name? Draw, length, start. Those are all based on like what page am I on and how many am I going to take off of my collection. So what does this look like then? So if we were to say, okay, of all of the members in my database, and you can see how here, if you're really interested in deferred querying, how this can really optimize. If I have 1 billion records, I need to only show 54. This is really helpful to create a SQL query that will only get it down to that 50 and help your application be really performant. So I need to build some things up though manually to satisfy the contract between data tables. Now I've personally wrote some libraries that even help abstract this even more and make it even more simplistic. But I want to show this kind of a little bit more bare metal and down and dirty. So we are going to get the total count of how many records are in the database. If we have a search value, we can, based on the columns that I allow searching to occur on, I can filter down then to those records, and I'm going to get a new count based on that. Now, I'm doing these counts so that I can keep intact that like little helper message that says, one of 4 records out of 159. Otherwise, it gets a little lost. Okay, I'm going to get the first column of ordering, and I'm going to say, okay, based on which column I'm looking at, I'm going to order by ascending or descending of that particular column. That's just some stupid code. Here now again, start and length is where am I starting? Maybe I'm on page 50 of my pagination, or let's simple math. Let's say page 5, page lengths are 100. So I'm going to start at 500. I'm going to start at 500 and I'm going to take 100 new ones. So this is now giving you that pagination ability. And now right here is when I finally do the query. I terminate the queryable and I actually go and get data. And then I put it into a new thing called data table result, which is the contract that data tables is expecting to deserialize via JSON. And again, that's just a real simple object that we can create with draw, total records, filtered records, and then the IEnumerable of all of the objects that we need to deserialize from the other side. And then we hand it back as a JSON result through the action. And voila. I know I went through that maybe fast. And so if you're not familiar with stuff like this, you know, maybe it was a little bit too much. But if you're familiar with, EF or Hibernate or iQueryables of any sort, it's not really all that bad, especially given, I wouldn't production wise want to write a ton of code like this repeatedly. Hence why I've optimized it even further in production environments. But for a hackathon where time is precious and you may only really need to build like one or two of these views, it's worth this to do this just really quick and get what you need going. Okay, but I promised you I would show you one more trick with this. So with all of this too, you can see that we have some yellow highlighting. This is done with an extension called MarkJS. And MarkJS has a data tables plugin that you can add. And literally all you have to do is download the right things and add them to your layout, include them in your layout, and it works magically. Okay. So what that looks like is if we were to go to our layout, we include jQuery, MarkMin, and data tables MarkJS. That's all we have to do. So now all we have to do is go and I take that away. I got to do one more thing. Those JavaScript libraries now add this extension to your data table initialization. And so you say mark equals true. Now that's it. So now after that, all we have to do is download the right resources. So we do that by going back here and we go to MarkJS. Now, MarkJS, both the JS and the other repo that has the data tables MarkJS has a lot of CDN downloads and a lot of this. I personally don't trust any of those. So it's not that MarkJS is a bad library. It's just I don't like being redirected all the places for all the different downloads, especially when I only need one file. So I go to MarkJS. I go to the distribution folder and I'm going to pull out the jQuery MarkMin.js and download that directly. Likewise, I'm going to go to the data tables MarkJS repo. I'm going to go to the distribution and I'm going to download the data tables MarkMin.js directly. Add it to my assets. And from there, I can rock and roll. So literally, that is all you have to do to get really super rich, full functioning list views within your application, literally within less than an hour. So I hope this helped. More JavaScript library videos are on the way. Absolutely let me know if you have any questions.